Welcome everyone to this celebration of Palm Sunday, and if you're a visitor, we are particularly glad that you've joined us today. If you took pictures or videos, please forward them to me. I'll put them on social media, tag the church to Park Hill UCC, and share with everyone the joy we had in coming here today. So Palm Sunday quickly, however, turned to a different tone. We learned about what happened almost immediately after Jesus entered into Jerusalem. And so the rest of the service is going to be a series of readings and things that I say and songs that we sing, and I just invite you to follow along in your bulletin as we listen to the words from the Gospel of Matthew. My sermon will just sort of be interspersed in between all of this. And my sermon begins with how, if you recall earlier this week, Vice President Mike Pence complained that he is a victim of religious oppression. And that's because openly gay Mayor Pete Buttigieg said, if you have a problem with who I am, your problem, sir, is not with me, but the Creator. A really effective line, I would say it too. But Pence was shocked. Fox News was outraged. How dare he? Pence said, I don't have a problem with him. He knows me better than that. But Mayor Pete knows him all too well. As Indiana's governor, Pence repeatedly blocked hate crimes legislation, said that homosexuality is incompatible with military service, wants to ban transgender soldiers already serving honestly. Pence, this I learned, sought to take money away from HIV prevention to provide government-funded gay conversion therapy. And of course, his push for religious liberty laws to create the legal right to discriminate against LGBTQ people. And the rest of the list is extensive and exhausting, and might tend to prove that Pence has a problem with the Creator. Now, Mayor Pete didn't call Pence a bigot or a hypocrite. But you can't do all those things and claim not to have a problem with LGBTQ people. You can't do all that and then smile and stand behind porn star affairs, and playmate payoffs, and multiple marriages, and serial adultery, and grabbing women's genitalia. You can't claim family values and support separating families. You can't claim to be pro-life, but only as long as it is a fetus. When it comes and is hungry, not a problem. You can't decry migrants fleeing violence, and then support taking away funds to make the countries they are fleeing any less violent. Now, Mayor Pete was polite about all of this. Jesus, however, doesn't have that kind of issue. And we're going to hear today Jesus call out leaders on their hypocrisy with such verses as, whenever you pray, Jesus said, do not be like the hypocrites, for they, pointing at scribes and Pharisees, they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at street corners so that they may be seen by others. Now, imagine Fox News in that day and their response to Jesus in that moment. Shocked spokesmen for the indignant Pharisees would call the accusation ridiculous. They would call Jesus a bully. The KKK would start planning a rally. These things have changed. But Jesus began his ministry with a vision of the world set upside down, or actually more set back up, right. Blessed are the poor, and woe to the rich. He taught a series of reversals. You have heard it said, but I say to you. Now, just to be clear, he was not denouncing Judaism, his religion. He was simply critiquing how it had come to be practiced, how the authorities were more concerned with the letter of the law than the law itself. A law based on the love of God and the liberation of humanity from greed, hate, and violence. Jesus said,
"You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also a 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you."
Now, Jesus in that moment wasn't talking about charity. He stood in front of crowds of lepers, prostitutes, the poor, the oppressed, and marginalized, and he taught them how to subvert the system by means of love, as the indignant religious establishment stood by watching. And he challenged all of us to love our enemies.
"You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of our God in heaven. God makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as God is perfect."
Now that last one is curious. Jesus wasn't calling for perfection, as we often think of it in modern terms. Eugene Peterson translates the meaning rather, live the way God lives toward you, generously and graciously toward others. Perfect means completed. We can get distracted by the word perfect and miss the point. That Jesus, in this moment, is calling out the hypocrisy of the religious establishment, who are neither generous nor gracious toward others. And he goes on saying concerning charity,
"Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your God in heaven. Whenever you give alms to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret. And your God who sees in secret will reward you.
And concerning treasures,
do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Jesus concluded these and other reinterpretations and summed it all up in the golden rule. "In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets."
So, how did the religious leaders respond to this criticism? So, it kind of reminds me of how people responded to a kneeling Colin Kaepernick. Right? Not with concern for the poor or outrage over injustice, but for being called out. Complaining, for example, about ungrateful NFL players, those sons of, I can't repeat our president in polite company. Their outrage was simply that someone would call out injustice, to the point that they ultimately whipped up a crowd into shouting about Jesus, "Crucify him." point on Palm Sunday, we would often listen to the macabre stories of torture, known as the Passion narratives, and sing about the, quote, saving grace of blood and sacrificing the lamb. We sing of shame and blame. And a familiar song from Holy Week is, like many others, a hymnal, "Who was the guilty? Who brought this upon you? It was my treason, Jesus, that has slain you. And I, dear Jesus, it was I who denied you. I crucified you." No, you and I did not crucify Jesus. We are not the guilty, but our faith teaches that we are the responsible. Kind of like the realization that a white basketball player this week from the Utah Jazz named Kyle Korver wrote about. Great article. He came slowly to the realization about white privilege. He said, as white people, are we guilty for the sins of our forefathers? No, I don't think so, he said. But, he added, we are responsible for them. We are responsible, not because we're guilty, but because we have benefited from an ugly history. It's not some random divide. And therefore, come to realize the problem isn't primarily about those racist hecklers in the stands. We need deeper solutions to the racism ingrained in our system. Not passing blame, but recognizing the need for police reform and criminal justice reform and mass incarceration and the death penalty and wealth inequity and differences in school discipline practices. And that's exactly why it's more important to remember why Jesus was crucified than how. We need not be fascinated by the details of his crucifixion, by some sense of guilt, but rather fixated on the people whom Jesus loved so much he would sacrifice his life to show us the way of love and compassion and accept our responsibility as people of faith. And that's why it's such an amazing synchronicity that our mission partner this month is the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. And Jasmine Ross, member of our church, you're going to tell us a little bit about it.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. So first, I would like to say from CCJRC, thank you so much for those of you who donated to us last Sunday service. We really appreciate your support and the donations. The second thing is I will be here again next Sunday. It'll be my last Sunday with you all, so thank you again for your time and your support and the donations. So my name is Jasmine Ross. I am the Civic Engagement Assistant and the Volunteer Program Coordinator for CCJRC. If we have new members joining us today, CCJRC stands for the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. It was founded in 1999 by our Executive Director, Christy Donner. We are a C3 non-profit, nonpartisan organization that focuses on eliminating the overuse of the criminal justice system and advancing community health and safety. So why are we so big on this concern issue? The reason why we are concerned about this issue is because we know in this state and in the country yet alone, we over-incarcerate, we over-criminalize, and we over-police people. This country over-incarcerates more people than any other country in the world. We incarcerate 2.2 million people. And so just to give you a little feedback about what CCJRC has been doing to help with this issue, we have closed 6 prisons in the state of Colorado, 4 of them being private. We also have passed close to 85 legislative bills on the criminal justice reform. And then we also have helped move $60 million from the prison budgets for substance abuse and mental health treatments for people in and out in the community. So, again, I encourage you and thank you so much for supporting this organization and in our work. If you would like to learn more about
this month, any cash in the offering plates or any checks on the memo line, mission partner will go to support this really important work. A couple of very brief announcements. This is Holy Week, so we will gather on Thursday night for our Maundy Thursday service at 7 p.m. We will celebrate the Last Supper of Jesus. We will remove the elements of this from the sanctuary, the scripture cloths, and be together in a time of prayer and reflection. 7 o'clock. On Saturday, we'll be gathered here to do some house cleaning for our guests coming the next day. Some work in the yard and some cleaning in here. So bring some rags and cleaning supplies or gardening supplies, whichever you would prefer. Saturday, 8:30, just for a few hours. And then Sunday morning, we'll be here for breakfast, 8:30 to 9:30. If you're interested in helping, Rob, would you stand up so they can see you and talk to Rob if you'd like to be willing to help with that. And last announcement, we're bringing in a nationally known author and blogger, John Pavlovitz, in May on the 14th, a Tuesday. And I put out ticket availability on Eventbrite just over a week ago. We have room for 200 people, and if you can believe it, we have 10 tickets left. So if you would like to go to our church website. At the very bottom is a link for tickets. I'm sorry that this is so popular, we have run out of space. So I now invite you to give of your offerings and your tithes. Again, we remember, in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you. For this is the whole law and prophets. And then concerning prayer, Jesus said,
Whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to Abba, who is in secret. And Abba, who sees in secret, will reward you. When you are praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your God knows what you need before you ask.
And so let us pray as Jesus taught.
Our Creator,
holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
him and said, I have compassion for the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on the way. The disciples said to him, Where are we to get enough bread in the desert to feed such a great crowd? And Jesus asked them, How many loaves do you have? They said 7 and a few small fish. Jesus ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground. He took the 7 loaves and the fish, and after giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all of them ate and were filled. And they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And those who had eaten were 4,000 men, plus women and children.
crush upon Jesus from the crowds was often relentless. The disciples were just as often clueless, and the criticism by the authorities unyielding. How dare you say that about us? But Jesus replied,
Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good things when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person brings good things out of a good treasure, and the evil person brings evil things out of an evil treasure. I tell you, on the day of judgment, you will have to give an account for every careless word you utter. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned.
How do you think that was received? Join me in the litany in your bulletin. Jesus now faced the consequences of challenging those in authority. They clearly believed his teaching about the kingdom of God was subversive. Break the chains of oppression. Set the prisoner free.
Share your bread with all who are hungry. Clothe the naked.
Shelter the homeless and give protection to the lost.
Why is this subversive? Isn't this good news?
Indeed, why do the powerful want to silence him?
From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things.
In chapter 17, Jesus again foretold his death and resurrection, and even a third time after that.
As they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised. And they were greatly distressed.
upsetting the authorities and making them more nervous every day. And his abilities went far beyond his stirring up the crowds. It was the power of God working through him in miracles and healing. It was his great love and compassion for hurting humanity. And among many stories is this one in which Jesus healed 2 blind men.
As they were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. There were 2 blind men sitting by the roadside. When they heard that Jesus was passing by, they shouted, "Lord, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd sternly ordered them to be quiet. But they shouted even more loudly, "Have mercy on us, Lord, Son of David." Jesus stood still and called them, saying, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." And moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes. their sight and followed him.
Moved with compassion. Moved with compassion. This is why I say Jesus is the one I follow, to be ruled by compassion. But imagine being compassionate, all the pressure of the crowds constantly upon you, and expectations for Jesus to perform. So like the rest of us, he often grew tired and weary. And when you're tired and you're weary, at least for me, I can get a little angry. And you can hear how it got to him when he cursed a fig tree.
In the morning, he was hungry, and seeing a fig tree by the side of the road, he went to it and found nothing at all on it but leaves. And then he said to it, "May no fruit ever come from you again." And the fig tree withered at once. And when the disciples saw it, they were amazed, saying, "How did the fig tree wither at once?" Jesus answered them, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only will you do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, 'Be lifted up and thrown into the sea,' it will be done. Whatever you ask for in prayer, with faith, you will receive."
As we celebrated this morning with the procession of donkeys cuter than cute can be, and with our palms, when Jesus entered Jerusalem, the crowds threw their cloaks and palm branches on the ground to welcome him like a king, but a very different kind of king, not like the one who also entered Jerusalem the very same day on the other side, riding on a chariot, surrounded by soldiers. Power of Jesus did not come from that kind of force. It comes from love, the humble love of those who accompanied him with a donkey.
When they had come near Jerusalem, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me." As he made his entrance into Jerusalem, the whole city was shaken. They were unnerved. People were asking, "What's going on here? Who is this?" The crowd answered, "This is the prophet Jesus, the one from Nazareth in Galilee."
So we followed the procession of those cute little donkeys into the sanctuary and took our seats and stood up and sang a beautiful hymn. But do you know what Jesus did immediately after arriving? He entered the temple and drove out those who were selling and buying. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer,' but you are making it a den of robbers." The blind and lame came to him in the temple. Quick little note. They weren't allowed in the temple, the blind and the lame. And he, moved with compassion, cured them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the amazing things he did and heard the children yelling in the temple, "Hosanna! to the Son of David." They became angry and said to him, "Do you hear what they are saying?" Jesus said to them, "Yes, but have you never heard? Out of the mouths of infants and babes you have prepared praise for yourself." He left them and went out of the city to Bethany and spent the night there.
Now while Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when the disciples saw it, they were angry and said, "Why this waste? For this ointment could have been sold for a large sum and the money given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. By pouring this ointment on my body, she has prepared me for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has been done will be told in remembrance of her."
Because there is nothing clearer in the Bible about Jesus than his sermon about the sheep and the goats. His greatest sermon. When the Son of Man finally arrives, blazing in beauty and all his angels with him, he will take his place on the glorious throne. And then all the nations will be arranged before him, and he will sort the people out, like a shepherd sorts out the sheep and goats, putting the sheep to his right and the goats to his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, "Enter, you who are blessed. Take what's coming to you in this kingdom. It's ready for you since the beginning of the foundation of the world. And here's why. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was homeless, and you gave me a room. I was shivering, and you gave me clothes. I was sick, and you stopped by to visit. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then those sheep are going to say to the master, "Master, what are you talking about? When did we ever see you hungry and feed you, and thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will say, "I'm telling the solemn truth. Whenever you did one of these things to the least of these, someone overlooked or ignored, that was me. You did it to me."
And then he will turn to the goats, the ones on his left, and say, "Get out, worthless goats. You're good for nothing but the fires of hell. And why? Because I was hungry, and you gave me no meal. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was homeless, and you gave me no bed. I was shivering, and you gave me no clothes. Sick, and in prison, and you never visited. Then those goats are going to say, Master, what are you talking about? When did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or homeless or shivering or sick or in prison and didn't help? And he will answer, I'm telling the solemn truth. Whenever you fail to do one of these things to someone who is being overlooked or ignored, that was me. You failed to do it to me. Then those goats will be herded to their eternal doom, but the sheep to their eternal reward.
How can a follower of Jesus, anyone using the word Christian about themselves, ignore these words from the mouth of Jesus? When the Son of Man will be betrayed and handed over for crucifixion. And at that very moment, the party of high priests and religious leaders were meeting in the chambers of the chief priest named Caiaphas, conspiring to seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. And they agreed that it should not be done during Passover week. We don't want a riot on our hands, they said. And they waited. And in the meantime, Jesus and his followers gathered for the Passover meal. And while they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, and he gave it to the disciples and said, Take, eat. This is my body. Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in God's kingdom. I invite you to our invitation to communion. In our bulletin it says, we come to this table because Christ invites us. We come hungry, ready to be fed. We come thirsty, ready to drink. We come to remember. We come in remembrance, but much more. In recalling the life of Jesus, we are moved by the death of Jesus to be Christ-like among suffering humanity. Let us not gather here in passive recollection, but in our active commitment. Jesus took the bread, daily Jesus blessed the bread, thanked the God of grace, thanked the one who made all worlds, all time and space. Blessing, honor, praise, all to God belong. Let us lift our
Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. And then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "Abba, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So you could not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the 2nd time and prayed, "Abba, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, here comes my betrayer."
And so, then began the events, the actions that led to the execution of Jesus on a cross, which was the means and method, the most cruel means and method of the Roman Empire, to send a warning to other would-be prophets, because it would scatter all the followers. And the early Christians were a bit afraid, and they did hide behind doors for a few days, but they were inspired by Jesus' love to organize communities of love and resistance. So shall we. When we gather back here on Thursday night, we'll hear the events that followed this betrayal, and then on the first day of the week, gather to remember that the love of God for suffering humanity means hate will not forever prevail. And you know what? Cruelty? Do we know cruelty in this world? It's already on the way out. That's exactly why it's more important to remember why Jesus was crucified than how. We need not be fascinated by the details of his crucifixion by some sense of guilt, but rather fixated on the people whom Jesus loved so much he would sacrifice his life to show us the way to live, to accept our responsibility as people of faith. And part of that responsibility, I will say after this whole thing we've been talking about, is to consider our own hypocrisy and take the log out of our eye before pointing out there's a straw in our neighbor's. As we gather today, I invite us to honor the life of Jesus and remember his love through the sacrifice he made in the words of the litany in our bulletin. Christ Jesus, in agony in the Garden of Olives, troubled by sadness and fear, comforted by an angel.
Christ Jesus, betrayed by Judas Iscariot, abandoned by your friends, delivered into the hands of our powerful.
Christ Jesus, accused by false witnesses, condemned to die, struck by servants, covered with spittle.
Christ Jesus, disowned by your disciples Peter, delivered to Pilate and Herod, condemned as a criminal.
Christ Jesus, carrying your own cross, Calvary, consoled by the daughters of Jerusalem, helped by Simon of Cyrene.
Christ Jesus, stripped of your clothes, praying for your executioners, pardoning the thief.
Christ Jesus, entrusting your mother to your beloved disciple. giving up your spirit into the hands of your father, mother, showing us how to live and how to die through the example of your sacrifice.
Let us remember his death,
but more importantly, let us imitate their life in these ways.
At the lynching memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, Brian Stevenson wrote these words. We say it as our benediction. We will remember.
With hope, because hopelessness is the enemy of justice.
With courage, because peace requires bravery.
With persistence, because justice is a constant struggle.
With faith, because we shall overcome. Amen? Amen. Go in peace.